Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, I have with me a guest. It depends on what kind of shirt he's wearing and whether or not you're gonna like him, but he's not wearing his referee shirt right now. Right now, he's sitting behind a computer. You can call him a computer boy. You can call him calculator boy, whatever you want. I don't really care. But he does work for an OHL team. He is a data tracker with the Mississauga Steelheads, and he is my friend Anthony. Anthony,
Hey guys.
what is your role with the Mississauga Steelheads? What makes you qualified to be here talking about NHL prospects today?
Thanks, Steve, for the intro. It's quite the intro. I'll take that. So I am a data tracker with the Mississauga Steelheads. So why am I qualified? For the last couple of years, I've watched quite a few OHL games and CHL games here and there. I record information as I watch games, and that depends on what the team wants me to record. That's stats as well as just information. I like calling it information because sometimes data gets a bad rap.
All right, so it is a form of scouting in a way, and you have seen a lot of the players here, especially the guys from the OHL. And what we're seeing up on the screen right now are the prospects ranked from 10 through 33 on Bob McKenzie's list, and they're here by even strength primary points per games played. That's what we're going to be looking at, and we have a little bit of a breakdown of what their strengths and weaknesses are on the side there. So we're going to be touching on a couple of things in today's video, including best player available, drafting for positional needs, if trading down is a scenario for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and going over that because I know some people have some conflicting feelings on that. Maybe talking about goalies as well. I know you're not too big of a fan of drafting a goalie in the first round there. And if there's a guy at number 15 that they absolutely have to take, who would that be? So when we're talking about best player available versus drafting for positional needs, what is the thing there? Because everyone in Toronto is just saying that the Leafs need a defenseman. They need a defenseman. And I think if Toronto walks away from drafting in the first round, whether that's at 15 or at a lower spot or a higher spot, or maybe a couple of times in the first round if they get pretty creative with the trades there, if they don't walk away with the defenseman, I know that people are going to be pretty upset by that. Do you feel that people should be upset by that?
Yeah, I'm all for drafting best pick available, and the reason why I say that is because if you have a list of guys that you believe is the best available at this point in time, if you're first in the draft, 10th in the draft, 20th in the draft, 100th in the draft, if you take anyone lower than what you believe would be the best player available, you're losing potential value in that player. And if you were at 15 and you end up taking a defenseman that would be ranked 20th in your rankings, you're losing out on what you would believe is five draft positions. And so I believe that if you take the best pick available, regardless of position and even goalies, I think you're going to leave with the most value, and the most value leaves you with more options later on. Whether people agree with that or not, it's the truth.
I think that Brian Burke in 2012 kind of said it best there, where they had Morgan Rielly ranked number 1 on their draft board, where if they had the first overall pick, they would have taken Morgan Rielly at number 1. And we were talking a little bit before the video got going, and you said that that's problematic. Why would he take Morgan Rielly at number 1 when no one else had him at number 1?
So Morgan Rielly, for example, was not going to go first overall. And Brian Burke said that if they picked first overall, they would have taken Morgan Rielly. What he meant was that he was number 1 on their board. Mm-hmm. But if you have the number 1 pick, I don't think I take Morgan Rielly, even if I'm Brian Burke. I think that I try and get something else out of it. I can want to pick Morgan Rielly, and I could pick Morgan Rielly. I just won't take him at number 1. I'm going to go to the guy who has a number 2 or the number 3 pick and say, look, you guys want number 1. We don't really like what we see. And you take what you get from that, because I think you mentioned it when we were talking before the video. If the New York Rangers decide to do that right now with, say, Ottawa, I think Ottawa, you said that Ottawa has to probably give up both the 3rd and the 5th to get the number 1. So it's quite a bit of value.
And maybe even more than that.
1. And maybe more. You might have to throw in a prospect or something like that. But the value that you get moving down is the reason why Dubas likes doing it. It's because, for example, when they picked Sandy at 29, they didn't pick Sandin at 25, the original pick that they had, because they didn't believe anyone else had Sandin at 25.
So you said that they didn't believe that anyone else had Sandin ranked number 25 on their list, so they traded down. And we're looking at the trade right now up on the screen. They traded the number 25 pick, which turned into Dominic Bach, and they got Rasmus Sandin, and this is the number 76 pick, which turned into Semyon Darganjinstev, who looks like a decent prospect playing with the Peterborough Petes and Nick Robertson there. Rasmus Sandin was their guy, and that's why they did this, correct?
Yeah, my point was that the way that you gain anything with good scouting is getting extra value. Okay, so let's say that trade didn't happen and they had to take Sandin at 25, then they're losing out on that third round pick. So they knew that whatever they can get, if they can move down in the next 2 picks, 3 picks, 4 picks, in this case we got to 4, then they can still get their guy and they get something else out of it. Doesn't matter what that thing is.
You see, but then other people are looking at the trade down scenario here with a genius boy, Kyle Dubas. That's what they're calling him. Some people call him Dumbass. It's pretty creative. I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but when we're looking at the trade down scenario that happened in 2015 here, where they had the 24th overall pick, which turned into Travis Konechny, which they flipped for 29 and 61, and then they flipped 29 for 34 and 68. So they ended up with Travis Dermott, Martin DeCircles, and Jeremy Bracco. And Martin DeCircles is no longer with the organization. Jeremy Bracco is a huge question mark, although that's a different topic before. Link above the top of the screen there to a video where I did talk about Jeremy Bracco and what I would like to see the Maple Leafs do with him next. If you're interested in that, check it out after this one. So they ended up with Dermott, DeCircles, and Bracco, but Travis Konechny is the best player in that trade. But you were saying before the video, before we started recording the video here, that they probably viewed Travis Dermott as their guy, that he was going to be the best player there.
This is a perfect example of sometimes you just don't know what's going to happen. Like,
right
at this point in time, at number 24, what I think at least is that they had Travis Dermott on their board. They were going to take Travis Dermott number 24, and they were looking around and saying, well, let's see what we can do, because I'm sure Travis Dermott was going to be around to 29. They believed that Travis Dermott was their guy, and then they knew that he was going to be around to 29, so they moved down. They realized that, at 29, he's likely going to drop down a few more, so let's see what else we can get. Now, they were wrong, and sometimes that happens, right? Travis Dermott is objectively not as good as.
But what I also pointed out before we were talking is I believe Sebastian Aho was picked 35th overall. So it's not to say that there's not good players available in that range.
Right. But the same scenario as you said, Sebastian Aho went
35th.
35th. So in this scenario, the exact same thing could have happened. They could have taken Travis Dermott at 24. The next team could have picked Travis Konechny at 25, and it would have looked like, wow, the Leafs missed out on Travis Konechny. But the Leafs had Travis Dermott as their number 24. So that's just, sometimes you just don't know. But the difference is that the Leafs still got Travis Dermott. They still got 2 extra picks for him, and it was a lot more than they would have had if they just taken Travis Dermott at number 24.
Okay, so we touched on some trade down scenarios here, but is there a player that if he falls to the Toronto Maple Leafs at number 15, or if he's still available by the time the 15th pick rolls around, is there a guy that you absolutely have to have? I have a couple in mind, and I know that you have one guy in mind as well.
Seth Jarvis, period. I think if Seth Jarvis is available at 15, he won't be available at 16. So there's no trading down to still get Seth Jarvis.
So what about Seth Jarvis makes him so special? Because I have your tableau up on the screen here for the people to view. What about him makes him so special that the Maple Leafs would just need him at number 15?
It's all draft-level players organized by primary points per game. Mm-hmm. So you see like Lafreniere above and beyond everyone else. If you actually just hover over him,
okay.
So if you just hover over him, you can see that his primary points per game is 1.67. So not touching anyone, that's unreal. But Seth Jarvis is the 5th best player in terms of creating his own offense in the CHL this past season. Draft eligible, that is. And he's basically like a Barzal type, if you want to go there, Marner-ish. I would say he's like Marner light. He's quick, shifty, He's going to find his way into the neutral zone, or sorry, into the offensive zone real easy. He's going to, dangle around guys. He's going to create space for himself. He's actually good at protecting the puck, though. He's a lot better probably than Marner is against the walls. He uses his hands to get in close, and he gets a lot of his goals from in tight, which is why he has so many. And on top of that, he's got an unreal shot for such a small player. I think he's only like 160 or something like that, but he's got a hell of a shot behind him.
Okay. That sounds like you mentioned William. You mentioned Mitch Marner there. That kind of sounds a little bit like William Nylander.
You know what? Yeah, it actually does.
So you mentioned Seth Jarvis as a guy that you would absolutely have to have if he was still available there at 15. In my mind, there are two other guys that the Maple Leafs just absolutely have to have if he's there at number 15. One of them being Anton Lundell, a center in the SM Liga right now. He is just absolutely high. He's the highest touted two-way forward in this draft. There are comparisons to Sean Couturier. There are comparisons to Patrice Bergeron. Do with those as you will. Scoring has been kind of an issue for him in the past, or that's what scouts have said, but he's gotten himself off to a pretty good start in the SM Liga this season, and I think the Maple Leafs would heavily benefit from having a really strong two-way centerman like an Anton Lundell, but that would be pretty that'd be pretty crazy if he dropped that far. There are people that have him cemented in their top 10. Another guy we would be remiss if we didn't mention him is Yaroslav Askarov, the Russian goaltender. Some people are calling him the next Andrei Vasilevsky. Some people are calling him the best goalie prospect in the draft since Carey Price. I know that you said before we started recording, Carter Hart, I mean, a lot of people missed out on him. I believed he was drafted in like the 50s or something like that in 2015. But you were saying kind of before the video got underway, the goalies are kind of voodoo, in the sense that they're risky to take with first-round picks.
Yeah, I mean, one, it stops me from saying they should take a goalie there because I don't know enough about them. And it honestly, even the most knowledgeable goalies don't even know much about goalies. They're just completely voodoo. But the reason why I say that is because for the most part, you're taking a bigger chance with the goalie because you really don't know how he's going to turn out. With a forward, especially, you can tell that if he scores in the league that he played in junior, then he's likely going to translate at least some of that to the NHL. Maybe he's not going to be the 100-point scorer that he was in junior, but he's going to be at least reliable. So there's a little more connection between junior and the NHL.
It's a little bit more predictable, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a lot more predictable actually. With goalies, it could be that they're just facing bad shots, and then once they start facing great shots, then they just topple off, and that happens with a lot of goalies that are picked high.
You were saying that, and it kind of jogged my memory. When the Maple Leafs drafted Ian Scott, the Prince Albert Raiders were one of the worst teams in the WHL, and his save percentage was in like the high 800s or something like that. But he was a guy that got absolutely peppered with shots and high-quality scoring chances left and right because the team was so bad. And then once the team got a little bit better the next season there, he was used to that, but all of a sudden now he's not necessarily in that environment, but he's used to it, and he was the most outstanding goalie in the entire Canadian Hockey League the season after that, and posted a save percentage over 930. So it is really just voodoo. We're not saying not to take Askarov or Askarov. We're just saying that would be a very high risk, high reward pick. So moving away from the forwards and the goaltenders that are available here in the first round, we haven't talked too much about the defensemen here. When I was looking through Bob McKenzie's final rankings, he noted that this is not the best year for defensemen. I know that you were saying outside of Jamie Drysdale, you'd be surprised to see another defenseman picked in the top 10. I mean, Jake Sanderson might have something to say about that, but maybe Jake Sanderson is another guy that if you were to fall to 15, you would have to kind of consider him just because of his two-way upside and how beyond his years he is the description that you used. But there's other guys here. There's Caden Gooley, there's Braden Schneider, there's Helge Grans, there's William Wallander, and a lot of people are really excited about those guys, but you're not one of them.
It's not that I'm not excited about them. They're all great players in their own right, but this is probably like the wrong draft to be completely forward biased, and then off season where the Leafs are looking for some defensive help. It goes back to that best pick available, and it made me think of getting Jake Muzzin. And the only reason why the Leafs got Jake Muzzin was because they had Sean Durzi. What won them that trade? What got them Jake Muzzin? It's Sean Durzi, right? You pick a guy who at the time you might not exactly need him. He's another offensive defenseman up that you probably don't need. But what you do need is just value that you can end up moving for more value later on.
So what you're saying is not actual value to you personally, but perceived value to everyone else. And
exactly.
What attracts that perceived value, or what gives it off most of the time, is the offensive prowess of players, just because that's what people see on the highlight tapes. They don't show a guy spreading out on a 2-on-1 to block the shot or take away the passing lanes. And also, in the sense, for anyone who's upset by our take with defensemen here, our thinking and our logic behind it is that if Seth Jarvis or one of the other forwards that are available here, doesn't necessarily have to be Seth Jarvis, if that guy becomes what you hope he is, if he is that second or first line forward afterwards, he makes it easier to move on from a Mitch Marner or a William Nylander. It's never that people are against trading those guys. It's just, what are you going to replace those guys with, and are you getting fair value back? Maybe if you have one of those guys like a Jarvis or a Lundell that can step in there and take that spot, or even a Nick Robertson, by the way, a link above the screen if you want to check out the video that I did about Nick Robertson just a couple of days ago. It makes it easier to swallow trading one of those guys, and maybe you don't necessarily need to get the sun and the moon back for them. You can compromise a little bit here and there. So I think we touched on the first round enough here. The Toronto Maple Leafs also own the 44th overall pick in the second round. They own 3 6th-rounders and 3 7th-rounders. There's a couple of guys here on this list that I threw in here myself that I found. I'm not the best with draft eligibles, but there's a bunch of names that you told me to throw in here. Before we get to those, I just want to touch on your boy from the Mississauga Steelheads, James Hardie. What makes James Hardie so exciting here? Because when we were looking at your Tableau page a little bit earlier here, he was shown that he's 16th on this list out of all draft eligibles in the CHL for primary points per games played.
James Hardie is a flat-out scorer. The guy's gonna make his living scoring goals, as you can see at 34 last year, with unbelievable feat already as a draft eligible player. Comparable to some of the guys up at the top. He drives a line by himself. He can move through the neutral zone, puts pucks on net like unbelievably well. He's gonna be probably, I think at least he can make it into like a middle 6 scoring role. And I think he's gonna show us all that he can do that.
And I think the most exciting thing about him here is that it's his ranking. I mean, there's one of the higher scouting boards on McKean's rank has him rated at like 80th, and there's another one that has him in the lower hundreds. So the Maple Leafs can really clean up. They can get him with maybe a 4th or a 5th round pick almost, and that sounds like a pretty exciting player to get there.
Yep.
You also told me to throw in here because Kyle Dubas always gets one of his Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, and there's a couple of them on this list here. One of them being Ryan O'Rourke, who we will touch on in a second here because I think we're both big fans of Ryan O'Rourke. But Robert Calisti is an overager, and you told me to throw him on this list. Why did you tell me to do that?
He is an unbelievable offensive talent in the OHL this year, playing on the Sea Greyhounds. He is absolutely, I can guarantee it, he's on Cal's radar. The guy is an unbelievable offensive talent. He moves the puck up the ice. He can skate it. He can pass it. And he puts goals in the back of the net. As a defenseman, he's got 18 this past year. He is a 1-year overager. So it's a little less exciting, I guess. But as a 6th, 7th round pick, I'm extremely excited about those 6th and 7th, Steve. Almost as excited as I am for the 1st round pick.
Right, and you were mentioning before when we were talking, you're really excited about all those picks because that's just an opportunity for Kyle Dubas to just go full out high risk, just full out high risk picks with high reward there.
No one's gonna remember if you missed out on a 6th or 7th round pick, but if he turns out to be a Datsuk, or if he turns out to be and Andreas Janssen, then you'll remember. But there's no pressure.
Pierre Engvall.
Maybe Pierre Engvall, maybe.
there's a couple of 7th round picks on the Toronto Maple Leafs this past season that were pretty impressive there. But Ryan O'Rourke, we were having a conversation, and you said that the Toronto Maple Leafs need a horse. They need someone to just come in and play more minutes. And I guess that kind of goes into the Alex Pietrangelo talks, and link above the screen if you want to see what the Toronto Maple Leafs would need to do in order to afford an Alex Pietrangelo. But you specifically used the word horse. And I went out there and I was reading some scouting reports on Ryan O'Rourke, and I believe he led all defensemen or all players in the Ontario Hockey League in time on ice per game this past season. And people describe him as a physical defender, a very smart, very responsible defensive defenseman with a big booming shot. People don't really like him so much off the rush or his playmaking style of games, but when you're looking at Ryan O'Rourke, I kind of associate him with the same kind of player that Jake Muzzin is. Do you agree with that?
For the most part, I think so. Kind of along that line of he can be a top 4 for sure in the NHL. I think he has more offense to give, and I think he's going to show that next year and years to come. I see a guy who plays every minute you can muster up on whether it's 5-on-5, PP, penalty kill. He's a horse. He's a horse. He's good. He's really is an amazing defenseman, actually.
Xavier Simoneau is another guy that you told me to add on to this list here. He was a Leafs camp invite last year, but they didn't end up offering him a contract there. What about Xavier Simoneau made you tell me to put him on this list?
It was more just a theory thing. I think that I heard they were going to take him in the 7th round last year. He was someone on their short list for that spot. Didn't end up going with him. They went the route of a defenseman, I believe. The name escapes me, but Simoneau was on their list, and so I think he's still on their list. It's usually what happens when teams invite a guy to their camp after the draft. Is if they don't draft them, usually they'll invite them. So Simoneau is one of those guys. He had a breakout year last year, 28 goals, 33 primary assists. I think he's a candidate for maybe one of those late round picks if he's still available.
But the last guy that we wanted to touch on here in depth anyway on this list is Yevgeny Oksentyuk. Now, for the purposes, it's a very difficult name to just kind of read and pronounce that properly, so we could just call him Melkin. If that's a little bit easier here. But you told me to throw him up here on this list because he's absolutely filthy. And if we're sorting this by even strength primary points per games played here, he's pretty high up on this list and comparable to some of the guys that we looked at for even like the first round picks that we were talking about a little bit earlier on.
He's the highest OHL guy there. He's the highest OHL guy there.
He is an overager as well, and he is on your Tableau page for undrafted overage forwards here at number 12. But when I was reading scouting reports on this guy, the word that kept coming up was deceptive. This guy is just absolutely filthy when the puck is on his stick.
He kind of reminds me of a wide receiver in football. You know, when they like fake one way, juke out the guy completely, leave him on their ass. Yeah, like he puts people on their ass. Like he has the ability to cut one way, leave the defender in the absolute dust, and then cut the other way and go right to the net, go right around the goalie.
Now, the one interesting thing that you were saying is that he's from Belarus, and this is his first year playing in the OHL or the CHL, and that's maybe why he was looked over last season.
Yeah, I would think that it's probably a less scouted area in Belarus, and probably didn't stand out as much, right? He's likely playing against guys. I don't know if he was playing in a men's league last year. Don't quote me on that, but it's possible because there aren't that many leagues in Belarus. And if he wasn't, he was probably playing in a league with a bunch of younger guys that aren't very good. So, yeah, I think this year was kind of his breakout year to show what he can do. And he's going to get drafted this year. It's just a matter of how high and if he falls to the Leafs side. I'd be excited to see what he ends up.
And now he has that deceptive ability. He has that puck handling ability. But also what I was reading in that scouting report, this is a smaller guy. Isn't he like 5'8", like 160 something pounds? Like he's a really small guy, but in the scouting reports that I read about him is that he's a guy that really drives the net hard on an angle. And he's also very, very defensively alert. And that's what the scouts are describing him as.
Yeah, no, he plays outside of his size a little bit. Like another guy that's like this, probably another honorable mention we didn't actually throw on here, but Dade Wisdom's another guy who plays outside of his size. The guy's 5'9", but he's like 200 pounds, 200 plus, and he's a bulldog. Like he literally like rolls through people. So Oksentyuk, not exactly to that degree, but he uses his size, even though he's small, he uses it smart.
Now, I know that we didn't touch on everyone here on this list, but I think that would be a little bit much to go through before the draft. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about, and maybe Anthony will join us on for a post-draft analysis.
Can I throw a little shout out?
You got to shout. You want to shout someone out in my video?
Yeah, I want a guy that was on here that we didn't talk about.
Okay.
And I think he deserves a shout. This guy's double overager, so he's played 2 years after his draft year. Riley McCourt, he probably put on almost top of the OHL talent year this year for a defenseman. I think he was one of the top 5 defensemen this year. Really rounded out his game. Unbelievable offensive defenseman, and I think he's one of those guys you hope for a value pick in maybe the 7th. It's a little riskier because he's a double overager, but I think of guys like Hollowell that maybe were overagers but really dominated the OHL, and he's a name that kind of comes to me.
And even like when people are looking at these prospects, I mean, Hollowell even played games for the Newfoundland Growlers for a little bit before kind of being a mainstay with the Toronto Marlies and looking like one of the better Toronto prospects, I guess, in their system. I think he would be in their top 10 if we're ranking Toronto prospects there. So even if this guy were to come into the Toronto system and play with the Newfoundland Growlers at some point, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a bust if he's not.
You have 3 7th-round picks, right? Like, I mean, you can, like I said, you can throw them any way you which really care. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you miss on one guy, but this is the guy I would put a little tab on because he's worth it in my opinion.
All right. Well, I think that we've touched on a lot of things here, and hopefully the people are not too angry with us. But if you are, make sure to let us know down in the comment section down below. And Anthony, let the people know where they can yell at you, because I would like to not have all the anger directed at me.
You can reach me on Twitter at AnthonyVena_. Shoot me whatever you want to, message me, or you want to send me a little tweet. That's all good.
All right, so make sure to like the video if you did like it, and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, remember, if the Toronto Maple Leafs don't draft a defenseman in the first round on October 6th, don't be too upset about it. It's not the end of the world, because like we discussed earlier on in this video, there's some pretty talented forwards available in this draft.